Hi, and welcome to Stamp with Ginny. Today I'm going to share with you this fun little stand-up calendar for the guys in our lives. This calendar is really easy to do with a half a sheet of cardstock, and it will fit in one of our standard envelopes since it folds down flat and it's only 4¼ inches across. And of course, if you'd like, add a panel for a signature on the back. So let me set this aside and I'll show you how I got started. I'm going to start with the scoring for this project, and so I'm going to score at the 4¼ inch mark, the 8½ inch mark, the 9½ inch mark, and the 10½ inch mark. And then I'm ready to put my scoreboard aside. At this point, I'm ready to bring in my crumb cake cardstock layer, and I'm ready to stamp. So I'm going to start with my sentiment because it'll help me with my placement of where I want to put my image. Oh, and let me set this down here. And I'm going to put my calendar in place as a mask, simply so that I know where I'm stamping. And I'm going to ink up my sentiment with my early espresso, and I'm going to stamp here on the left-hand side above the calendar. And then I'm going to bring in my plane, and I'm going to ink that up, and I am going to stamp to the right and just below that sentiment like so. So I've got my planer on there, and I'm ready to add some color. I've got my crumb cake in my blending brush, and I'm going to pick up some of this classic ink, place it on my brush, tap a couple of times, and then I'm going to bring in the color along the outside edge. This kind of gives it a vintage feel, and you can add as much or as little as you'd like. I do want to add a little more in the corners than I am adding across the top to kind of give it the vintage feel here. There we go. And I can even add a little color under my planer here where my calendar is going to be placed. I think I've got that the way I want, so I'm ready to start assembling. To build my stand-up calendar, I'm going to start by folding on the score lines. I'm going to fold the first 2 score lines back, and then this center score line I'm going to fold onto itself, and then the small 1/2 inch I'm going to fold back onto that. So I've got this little W shape here. At this point, I can add my tear and tape along the bottom edge here of my cardstock on this small scored area, and burnish so it's easy to pull off. I'm going to pull off that protective strip, fold this back on itself, and then fold down the front cover. Now this happens to be the back of my calendar only because that's where the seam is, so I should have called it my back cover. As you can see, it stands up easily, and I'm ready to mount my sentiment piece and my calendar. Now I'm going to set my calendar right down here, and because this is a 3D project, I'm going to bring back in my tear and tape, and I'm simply going to add some to the back of my little calendar here. And then I'm going to add some to the back of my panel. I'm going to add one down the center just for extra measure. There we go. I'm going to burnish those so they're easy to pull off. I'm going to start with my background here, my sentiment panel, and remove those strips. And I'm going to remove the strips on the calendar at the same time. So I've got the top of my calendar holder here, and I am going to lay this panel down in the center of the front of it. Remember, that seam is towards the back, just so that it's nice and neat. And then I'm going to add my little calendar directly below that, centering it on the front of my calendar holder. At this point, I'm going to bring in some of these rustic metallic adhesive back dots, and I'm simply going to add a couple of them on the corners here, 1 and 2, just to make it look a little vintage and like it's holding it in place. And of course, you can add some to the bottom corners if you would like also. So there you go, a stand-up calendar for your guy's desk. This calendar is really awesome to give somebody for a quick glance at the upcoming year. And of course, if you'd like any of these products, feel free to stop by my online store. You can get there from my blog, Stamp with Jini. Thanks for joining me.